you are not starting from zero. Your experience becomes an advantage, not a limitation. I'm Sam G, an architect who has rebuilt my career 3 times across South Africa, Australia, and now Texas, USA. Along the way, I've learned architecture isn't just code and concrete, it's culture, climate, community, and the courage to begin again. Your Design Passport brings you conversations on licensure, global practice, sustainability, lifestyle transitions, and the personal skills that actually help you thrive abroad. If you're dreaming about a global design life, grab your passport. We leave now. If you've ever applied for architecture jobs in the US and felt like your applications are disappearing into a black hole, you're not alone. And here's the frustrating part. Many incredibly talented international architects are getting filtered out before a real conversation even happens. Not because they aren't qualified, not because firms don't need them, but because the US hiring system works very differently than what many of us are used to overseas. In my last episode, I sat down with Rachel Davis, a recruiter who works closely with architecture and design firms here in the US, and she shared a lot of insight about what actually happens on the hiring side of the table. And after that conversation, it became really clear that there are a handful of mistakes international applicants tend to make, not because they're careless, but because nobody explains the unspoken rules. So in today's episode, I want to break down 5 of the most common mistakes international architects make when applying for jobs in the US, and what to do instead. If you're currently navigating the US job market, grab a notebook because these are things that gall. If you're currently navigating the US job market, grab a notebook because these are things that could genuinely change how your application is reviewed. Mistake number 1, treating the resume like an international CV. One of the biggest differences between job applications overseas and in the US is the resume format itself. Many international architects submit CV-style documents that are multiple pages long, extremely detailed, heavily academic. But in the US, most hiring managers and recruiters are scanning resumes very quickly, often in less than 30 seconds. That means clarity matters more than completeness. Instead of listing every project you've ever touched, focus on your role, your impact, the skills that transfer directly to US practice. Think less like an academic record and more like a professional highlight reel. Mistake number 2, assuming firms understand international experience. This is something Rachel mentioned that I think many people underestimate. Firms in the US may not automatically understand the reputation of your university, the scale of the projects you've worked on, the significance of the firms you've worked for overseas. And if the hiring manager doesn't recognize those references, they may unintentionally undervalue your experience. So instead of assuming the name will speak for itself, add context. For example, instead of writing Architect XYZ Studio, you might say, architect at a 200-person international design firm specializing in large-scale mixed-use developments across Southeast Asia. Now, the reviewer immediately understands scale, scope, and relevance. Mistake number 3, not addressing work authorization clearly. Another mistake that can create confusion during the hiring process is not being clear about work authorization. From the employer side, uncertainty around visas can make hiring feel complicated, even when it actually isn't. And this is something I experienced personally. Before moving to the US, my intention was applying through an E3 visa, which is a visa specifically for Australian professionals. It's actually quite different from the more widely known H-1B visa. The challenge I ran into was that many recruiters and hiring managers had never heard of the E3 visa before. So instead of them explaining the process to me, I often found myself explaining it to them. What I realized pretty quickly was that clarity makes a big difference. For example, the E3 visa has a few advantages. It's specifically for Australian professionals. It's not part of the H-1B lottery system, and it can be renewed indefinitely in 2-year increments. So once I learned how to explain that clearly, it actually became something that made employers feel more comfortable, not less. The key lesson here is that your work authorization situation is unique. It helps to explain it simply and confidently. Not every hiring manager is an immigration expert, and sometimes just removing that uncertainty makes a big difference in how your application is perceived. Mistake number 4, treating interviews like one-way evaluations. Another mistake I see people make is thinking the interview is purely about proving themselves. But one turning point for me personally was when I started turning the conversation around. Instead of only answering questions, I started asking the interviewers questions like, what do you most value in someone joining your team? What does success look like for this role? What do your strongest employees do particularly well? And the answers were incredibly revealing. In one interview, they told me very clearly that what they were looking for wasn't just technical skill. They wanted someone who could solve problems independently, someone who could figure things out without constant hand-holding. Now, of course, every new job involves some learning and support. That's normal. But hearing that helped me understand how they defined a great employee. So in the rest of the conversation, I focused on examples of times that I had solved problems on my own, taken initiative, figured out solutions without waiting for instruction. And that shifted the tone of the interview entirely. Because instead of guessing what they wanted, I was responding directly to the qualities they told me they valued. So if you take one thing away from this episode, let it be this. Interviews are not just about answering questions. They're about asking the right ones. Mistake number 5, thinking you're starting over. This might be the most important one. Many international architects come to the US feeling like they're back at square one. New licensing system, new job market, new expectations. But the reality is you are not starting from zero. You are bringing international perspective, diverse design approaches, experience working in different regulatory environments, adaptability. Those are valuable skills. The challenge is simply learning how to translate them into the US context. And once you start doing that, your experience becomes an advantage, not a limitation. If there's one key takeaway from today's episode, it's this. Many of the challenges international architects face when applying for jobs in the US are not about talent, they're about translation. Translation of experience, translation of expectations, translation of how the hiring system works. And the more you understand that system, the more confidently you can navigate it. But once you do start to understand how the industry works, something else happens. You begin to realize that architecture careers don't have to follow just one path. Yes, getting your foot in the door matters. But what you do with your career after that, the direction you take, the impact you have, can look very different from the traditional trajectory. In the next episode, I'll be speaking with Neil Pan, an architect based in California whose career expands far beyond the typical studio role. From running his own practice to serving as a planning commissioner and historic preservation commissioner, Neil has had a direct influence on how cities make decisions about development and the built environment. He's also a key voice in the architecture community as the founder of the ArchiSpeak podcast and host of Inside the Apple Studio, using media to shape how architects think, communicate, and engage with the profession. In our conversation, we talk about what happens when architects step beyond traditional practice into civic leadership, public influence, and new ways of contributing to the built environment. So if you've ever wondered what your career could look like beyond the expected path, that's an episode you won't want to miss. Your Design Passport just got another stamp. If you enjoyed this episode, follow Your Design Passport and share it with an architect or a designer navigating their own global career journey. Because every project, every move, and every experience adds another stamp to your professional passport. Until next time, keep sketching, keep dreaming, and keep building your global design career. Thank you for joining me on Your Design Passport. My hope is that every episode gives you the clarity, courage, and confidence to build a global design life that feels aligned with who you are, wherever you are. If today's conversation resonated with you, hit follow, share it with a friend, or leave a review so that more global dreamers can find this work. Until next time, keep exploring, keep expanding, and remember, your next chapter is already unfolding.